And then where Mike is standing there, that resident had put in large rocks there. And we found it right in the middle of the creek, a utility pole. And there's going to be one or two more before we get to Circle Drive. Again,
so it's a transformer on the utility pole. Is that the pole you showed?
That was the pole we were just showing, and you can see another one, I think, on up there, and there's going to be one just back to the south of Mike here. This is actually former Chief Bynum would be right to Mike's right there, if that kind of orientates some people. Coming on back, this is we're close to Circle Drive now, and there's this utility pole here. Just took another shot of that. I am standing on the bridge on Circle looking north there. You can kind of see the water height. The house on your left had damage to the flooring throughout the house, so that kind of gives you an idea how high the water was there. As the water spread out and you go back towards 18th, we had Atmos and West Star people and firefighters in 4 to 6 foot. Your son-in-law's pickup was down there, and it was at the windows. So,
yeah, I parked by Mrs. Halsey's house and walked down through the water that night. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it just was a tremendous amount of water in this area.
Yeah.
This is right on the south side of Circle Drive. Again, just pointing out utility lines running across there. So that's kind of the level of the creek. I'm sure, as Terry said, that was buried at one time, but just with years of erosion, that's where it's now at. Looking south, we're gonna start to go back into the railroad property, the creek. You can kind of see by some of the vegetation there where the water height was during this, back in this area. We're walking back in here. There's a lot of vegetation when you get onto the railroad property. We've been in a lot of contact with the railroad. In fact, they were there today removing trees and cleared a lot of brush that we'll show you here in a minute. And we're just walking back towards there's going to be 3 bridges. We're getting closer to the first. Just to tell you a little bit of erosion, right here you can kind of see the creek bends. It bends back to the west, and then it's going to bend back to the south, where all the waters over the years hit the bank. It's taken a piece of the pipe, storm drain pipe, and just dropped it off. It's eroded it all gone.
So that pipe didn't discharge into the creek originally. It carried the water somewhere else.
I think it did discharge right there, Mike. It's just, over the years, it's just eroded enough dirt away, Leonard, that the pipe just fell down. This is the first bridge, cement base. There were no obstructions here that we seen that night after. There's again a utility that's running right along the west side of the creek. It's a sewer line, right, Terry? Sewer line running there. You'll see one of the manholes right there. So it runs right along this creek.
The manhole was underwater?
Yes, it was above that. In fact, not this one, but the next one, the lid was off in the creek. We called Terry, and his guys went out there and put it back on. It had blown it completely off. And that night, not only in that area, but over on H Street, I gotta get my bearings, H Street, North 8th, we were having people, as the flash flooding event was happening, the sewer throughout town just began to back up into people's houses as the whole system just become flooded with water.
Yes.
The water at that point, it was as high as the railroad crossing.
Yes.
So
and over. You
Yes,
could tell by the
we could
debris
see,
trail when you walked it.
Yeah,
that the water had
it was
exceeded
definitely
that
over
of
the
what
top.
the debris was left from when I looked at it.
the manholes that are like this that are out in an open area, We probably need to look at raising those to get them above water level.
They have lids on, the one that came off, the bolts are rusted off,
Okay,
we'll get that repaired. so it won't
yeah.
go back down.
They're solid lids, they don't have holes in them?
Right, they're
Okay.
both down the gasket, no holes, so.
Okay.
So can you hear, now this, we start to see this tree here. This was right after the flood. This is one that I believe that should have been removed. We're walking towards the second bridge. This is the one that a lot of the citizens gave us some concerns, and we'll show you what those concerns are here in a minute. With the pilings look like they're rotting out. This is the one where the lid had blown off, and he put it back on, or they're in the process of getting it sealed down. This is the one with the wooden pilings. Was there 2 or 3 that are in that condition? Mike, come up here for a second. We met with, I'll let you give his name from the skull yesterday when we went out and looked at this.
Mike and Dave and I met with Jerry Wan, who's the general manager of the School Railroad. We walked it from Sycamore Street at the tracks all the way back north to the first bridge. We stopped and looked at this second bridge, and we discussed our concerns with the pilings. As we looked at it, there's 8 pilings total. 2 of them were bad. The other ones were in good condition. These are on abandoned lines, and so we did have that discussion. That reverts back to the prior owner on that. So those were abandoned prior to the school's ownership on them.
So with that, all that needs to be done is have them removed, right?
They could be removed. Waco is not in a position to do that. They were abandoned prior to their ownership.
Yeah, but if the line's abandoned, then you don't need the obstruction that those pilings create, so that bridge could be removed and you just have an open draw through there. Right now, they're restricting the flow, they're catching debris, and
That is correct.
Yeah.
It could,
yeah.
both ways.
What street's that on? Sycamore?
It's coming off Sycamore going back to the north. There's an abandoned line that runs off the Skull main line, moves back to the north and west, runs by the old ACC building, and that would cut on up through, continue north up by Ditmer's
Okay.
Float Barn, across to Oak Street, and it used to serve the LaHunt cement plant.
So the Skull Railroad, actually, their bridge, or their crossing that they're maintaining is the actual main line.
That's correct.
That'd be bridge number 3. So they're have no ownership on either bridge number 1.
Yeah,
or
those
bridge
were
number
those
2.
were abandoned.
Someone else, another railroad company, and they've been abandoned.
Yeah,
So Skull has no interest in either one of those.
that's my understanding on it. Yes.
So basically, it reverts back to the property owner,
Yes.
and they're the present owner of that property, owns those pilings.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, the Skull did go clear this obstruction today, right, Mike? Yes. Yes, this was cleared today by the Skull after visiting with them yesterday. The top picture was right after the August 7th. The bottom picture I took September 10th, but all this was cleared out today by the Skull after we visited them with yesterday. So this has been opened back up. As you walk along the banks, if you watch closely, you will see little culverts. I think Mike told me he thought this one came from 21st and 19th and Hickory. So there's little culverts that do feed into Whiskey Creek along here. This is one we just happened to spot as we were walking along. Okay, this is the skull line. This was cleared out today, has been taken care of.
Is that the main line crossing
This
there?
is the main line crossing. So, all that has been removed. This is just another picture of it. If you go up on top, not only do you have water coming down Whiskey Creek, but during a heavy flooding event like this, you have water coming down the railroad from 21st Street that also dumps, and it just runs right along that side. Because we were seeing all these railroad ties down in there with those trees and stuff, trying to figure out where did those come, and it just picked them up and takes them right down in there. We are in the canal north of Sycamore Street, so now we're between Sycamore and the Skull. And again, you go underneath the Skull Bridge, and you're back into a wooded area with a channel in it, and we're headed towards Sycamore Street. There's the Skull, and you can just kind of see the channel there that runs. This is standing on the south side of the Skull, looking back at that wood pile through one of the openings. There's three, I think there was 3 openings. So that is looking back to the north under there. Again, this has been fixed by Terry. There's sewer lines that run right there along the Skull. That's the active track right there. Again, we're just looking at that same bridge again, just a different angle. And there's a close-up looking from the south side. Back further, looking north still. Okay, we're at Sycamore Street. That is 17th up there, and back, if you could see it, 18th would be back here. You can see where the water height was there on that fence as all this water was coming across. So all this comes from a creek, and it has to get through these 2, and I'd estimate these 3 4-foot inlets here. I didn't get down there and measure them. And it goes underground, back in behind the business there, and there's about a 20-foot or maybe 10, 15-yard opening of this pipe back there that just floods out. So upper left, north side of Sycamore, you have all that water trying to get through those tubes, can't make it, so it flows over. It was about 2 to 3 foot deep in that area. What's getting through the tube is exiting out here.
So there's a lot of debris on the north side if the depth looks different from that picture on my left to what the discharge is in the picture on the right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of sediment in it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, there's like an opening in it,
Mm-hmm.
if you've been back to see, and then it goes back underground, about a 3-4 foot tube, and it's going to stay underground, go under 18th, and it's going to head over to the UP. All of this underground. There's a little storage shed building there that you can rent. Right behind that, it opens back up. Now we're right next to the UP where this opens up. All of this was underwater during that event. I mean, there's just so much water from all of this area clear back over to 17th, 16th. I mean, you just had water everywhere down in here.
No, I had one of the neighborhood people tell me that at Sycamore, where those 2 openings are, when I initially looked at that, I only saw one opening, and that other opening was later cleared. But when I was looking at it, one was completely blocked.
Yeah.
But they had told me that in years past, and I don't know how many years ago, I don't know whether the gentleman could remember or not, but the water flow under there at a previous time was so excessive that it caused Sycamore Street to buckle. I don't know how many years ago that was. Terry Liebarger might remember, or some of the city people that have been around here long enough. I don't have a time frame on it, but it was a pretty good number of years ago that the road actually buckled from a previous flooding incident way back.
I mean, when it's 2 to 4 foot above that, that's a tremendous amount of water coming across there. I mean, it definitely is.
It looks like that at one time that drain line was complete, and we're looking at portions that have collapsed and not been repaired or maintained.
And just blown apart, blown open. I didn't volunteer to go from there to the UP side. Maybe we can it'd be interesting to see what's open inside that tube, but
It looks like it was built with clay tile, and they actually formed the arch with the
Yeah.
tile, and it's just falling apart.
yeah. So the water comes rushing out of that tube, and it's going to come up here, and it kind of hits the bank of the UP Railroad, and it's going to turn, and it's going to head south. And you can kind of see it. I didn't take a very good picture, and I apologize, but it really eroded the side of the UP there, where so much force of water was coming there that night, and UP's addressing it before it turned and headed south down the east side of the railroad tracks. About 150 yards north of Laurel Street, there is a UP bridge right there. This is where the water moves from the east side to the west side of the tracks. Both of these were open. That's another picture of it. And right next to them, there's also these 2 tubes that were open that takes water to the west side of the railroad tracks there. Goes across, dumps into kind of like a creek again, very wooded area on the west side of the UP, and we're going to head south again. As you know, anytime you're down there, all this area was flooded that day. It was clear up into that field there. Was up to the tracks, wasn't over the tracks at this area. That is the Laurel Street Bridge that it's going to go under. And then once it gets under there, now we're headed towards Sanitation, Main Street on 21st. All of this was flooded that night. Water was clear up into the trailer courts. You could not go down that street. And this is under Main Street. The water again goes back under the UP. Water was completely over the tracks, shut the UP down. There was debris on the tracks. Water was flowing so heavily over here. And we're going to turn, go back to the east, under the overpass. Kind of has a little channel back in there that it is following. We're back into a heavy wooded area that the water is following back here. There's a little, I don't know if it's an old bridge, a walking bridge that the water goes under. It was obviously well over that night when it was flowing. It kind of comes, and then it's going to turn south and head back towards Maple. This inlet came from Laurel, Mike. This is an inlet that dumps from Laurel, from up around the hospital, from storm drains, right there under the underpass. So you're getting the water coming under the UP, and then this all hitting right there. We're headed towards Maple right now in this creek. This is Maple Street. The water, I was there that night. You could not see the cement. It was flowing over those cements. You could see the top of the fence, but that's how much water was flowing across here. You could just come over to the tracks, and you had to stop. It was completely flooded out here at this area. This is on the south side of Maple. And then from there, it continues on down the creek. I did not take more pictures here, but we pretty much, Mike and I followed it on down and out to Cherry Street, where then the water actually, I think it shoots back to the east, doesn't it? Headed towards the river, where it ends
Rock
up flooding 10th Street out right there at the tracks and across. So that is the slideshow. Leonard, if you have specific questions that we can answer, or however you want to lead it from here.
Seems like the problems that are most obvious first is debris blocking the culverts.
Mm-hmm.
That it's allowed to accumulate. There's debris that has blocked the bridges. There's sediment that's restricted the amount of flow through some of the culverts. Some of the drain lines have collapsed and in poor condition. And then a question of some of the sizes of the culverts. It appears that the first step is to clean out, to make the flow through the pipes. That's a restricting point of the creek, is every crossing. So first we have to open up all those and make sure they're clear. And until that's happened, we're not going to get anywhere. And then it's kind of a cumulative fact that you can't start at the top if you're going to block the water at the end. So from Rock Creek going north, everyone needs to be cleared and prepared. We had talked for quite a few years about a drainage study
Yeah.
of Whiskey Creek. That never has started, has it?
We have several studies, and Sean is here, and he can, that have been done by the Corps that we have. And I'll let Sean,
With the studies, you know, anytime you restrict water is where you begin with your problem. And when I've always heard, if you gather it into a pipe, if you release it again where that drain has broke out, that you can create another problem at that location. With the studies that the Corps did they evaluate the size of the culverts along the creek, or what was the?
I don't recall. It's been a little while since I've read that study, but it's a good question, and I think the question is, what's the capacity, overall capacity of Whiskey Creek when you compare it with like a 100-year event or 10-year event? I'm guessing it's something like a 2 or 3 year event is the capacity of it. And you are correct, at each culvert there are losses that do create an additional rise in the profile of the water in the stream. So any bridge or culvert you could eliminate, like the railroad bridges, you would gain some from that. So.
Because even the flow of water across rough terrain, and then you put it in a pipe, you accelerate the speed of the water going through there. So now you're creating an issue on the other side. But looking at the age of all those culverts that we're talking about, we're looking probably the 40s or the 50s for most of them installed, and we've increased development north of them considerable through the years. So, you know, I know we have to look at how much the water, the creek bed will actually carry, but if we don't open up each crossing to handle that flow, it doesn't do us any good to widen or to increase capacity in the creek if we keep restricting it at every street. So that seems...
You're exactly right, and starting at Rock Creek has to happen too, because if you start at the top end, you're really not going to gain much, and you're just, if anything, you're moving the problem downstream. But still, if you don't have that capacity downstream, it's not going to help much.
Yeah.
So it's a monster undertaking to do improvements that are anywhere near the 100-year event, but. You know, doing things like removing the debris and removing some of those unused bridges would be a big
Right.
benefit. So.
Then in some of the open land, if it's FEMA property, can't you open up kind of a retention pond,
Yeah, there's
say
some,
around Laurel to Main and Maple Street in there? Is there a chance
Well,
of?
there are, you know, this problem's been around a while, and there's been a lot of different kind of brainstorming ideas on things that can improve it. And that is one that's been discussed, ultimately building an extra wide channel that actually has some detention in it as well. What we've discussed also, though, this channel is large enough that it's under the jurisdiction of the Corps of Engineers. So the city, if the city owns the land or gains access to the land, they could go in and maintain it, which means cut trees out of the bottom. They can't go in and just do wholesale dredging.
Right.
But then if you were going to do some type of special project where you are changing the cross-section, that opens up into a pretty big analysis, environmental review and plans, so that becomes pretty significant. So
It seems like, though, the first step before you make the creek bigger is to make sure that the restrictions are large enough to carry the flow.
right, and that's something also that city manager and I discussed too. What capacity are you going for? Because the 100-year event, that's a huge cost to build that for the 100-year event. Typically, and this creek's somewhere in the middle, because typically cities on modern storm sewer will design it for the 10-year event, which is still a very expensive thing to do. So it is an issue of where you're going to design it to immediately. That comes to the forefront because there's a huge cost associated with what you choose as the level of service.
Yeah,
So,
and I,
Ballpark figure, what type of, what sort of,
we don't know because we
yeah,
don't know what the size is.
yeah, and it
See, that's-
greatly depends. I'm guessing now you're at a 2 or 3 on most of those culverts. Even to jump it up to a 10 is going to be pretty costly improvement.
And that's what, until we identify the problem to know how far they're off, we can't find a solution. And, we've got to know what the limit of the flood is, because, I'm sure we're gonna hear if I had a house there, I wouldn't be satisfied to know that I'm comfortable for a 10-year flood, but a 100-year flood, I'm going to get water in my house again.
Right.
And we've got to know what the problem is to identify what the solution, and then the options to solve it. If we can't open them all wide enough, then we've got to get the water far enough down that we can open it up in an unoccupied space to retain it in that land instead of their front yard or in their living room.
And we can take a look at the core study. It may have identified some of those bottlenecks. It's just been, I don't recall that it did, but it may.
But then the date is going to be important too, because our development in that area, we've got 2 schools, assisted living, because that break point is probably out around Mulberry. Everything from Mulberry south goes down through there. So,
I'd say that's pretty close. And there's, from an engineering perspective, there's the hydrology side, which is the storm and the runoff. And there's the hydraulic side. The hydraulics are going to be the same based on the core study, but that it is that hydrology element that has been some change to.
Yeah. So we need to begin research to see what the Corps has done, and if they're going to claim it, then how they're going to cooperate, or how we can cooperate with them. Use that word partner. How we can partner, and they can give it to us free.
Right.
No, but I can see from the photographs the condition of the creek bed is one thing, but the real obstruction has been at all those crossings that have been blocked for years, and that's getting those opened up and where they'll flow is going to make a big improvement. I don't think it'll solve that we can walk away until we start looking at the size of the culverts and know where we're gonna be, so we can start developing a plan on how to move forward, and definitely removing abandoned crossings. And because there, it's easy. You take the pilings out and you cut the bank back, and you can make it wider that you can give the relief there that you
Right.
need.
That seems to be some low-hanging fruit if we can
Yeah, and there
work
was
with
the two corrugated metal culverts, that tree growing right in between two of them. That's going to restrict the flow. There's a lot of things on our road right-of-ways that we can clear up and improve the entrance and the exit of the water. So, okay. Well, why not, at this time, Anita, would you like to address the commission with?
I'm just one of many that have concern with flooding in Whiskey Creek area. I have several pictures here that I've been given by a couple of the individuals that are also interested that I'd like to share. Some of these pictures were provided to the city approximately 3 weeks prior to the flooding, and this showed debris along the Oak Street underpass or waterway that, was not taken care of. And at that time, it was not known that it was the property owner's responsibility to clear out the creeks. Apparently, according to tonight, this has been their responsibility and not the others. Not the city, excuse me. I also have pictures of an individual's property the next day after the flooding, and it's occurred into a property that had not been received water damage in the past. It was in their garage and up into their yard. Personally, in 2007, my son's car was underwater, not totally, but still in water and damaged, and in front of our house. We live at 1121 Circle Drive. In 2014, we lost both of our vehicles that was parked in our driveway. And I believe the rain was a little over 5 inches at that time, but I could be wrong. In 2018, we moved our cars. We don't get any sleep whenever the rain starts pouring down. We start moving our vehicles to the north. And so although we didn't lose our cars, we did have damage to our motorcycle and scooter, which was in the shed in the back of our yard. Approximately 7.5 inches was the depth more this year than it was in 2014. And that's just marked on our steps. Also, our neighbor's car was underwater, and it was 39 inches deep at that point in front of their house. And their cars were damaged and lost. We only have the 2 storm drains right there between 18th and 17th as far as the water, other than the creek. That's the only 2 that are there. There's nothing on Oak, there's nothing on Beach. It all comes down to our street. Let's see, there's schools, houses, and the adult living area has been built since then, which I think has increased the water flow. And more than likely, there's other things that have increased it as well. I don't know how often the city goes through and walks Whiskey Creek to see what type of debris is there, but apparently it has been some time, because I don't think that the city would have let that sort of accumulation occur. So I don't really know how often they do it or if they do it. I know that you said there was something for a storm drain study. I hope that something comes out of that. Let's see. Have any other questions? I just know that it's gotten a lot closer and up a lot higher in the last few years. Like I said, 4 years ago, we lost vehicles, and 4 years later, we're 7.5 inches deeper, and we lost a couple other things. What are we to do? Our concern is, what are we to do? Are we supposed to stay up all night? Or are we supposed to be able to sleep at night and not have to worry about all the stormwater coming into our yards, coming into our homes, and destroying what we've earned?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look at the rainfall.
Percentages or inches?
Well, compare from what we had at 2014, you said when you referenced that rain, that this was 7.5 inches more,
Just on our, on our
Right.
step, right.
just to see if there is an increase of runoff or something. That could be a comparison
All
for us
right.
to
I have
look
pictures
at.
of the cars damaged. I'm sorry.
Do you not have some pictures from, when, with just a heavy rainfall? At
Yeah,
at
I sure
that
do.
point, it doesn't necessarily have to be a 6 or 7 inch rain.
This is about an inch and a half rainfall,
but
maybe
where-
inch and
Where the water
3/4.
backs up pretty quick
And it's
with.
out in our street. I have those. In fact, I believe in 2015, Mr. Sean Turner, I believe he came out and my husband and I visited with him about our drains
Okay,
in that area. My concern was if they weren't open enough, didn't know if it's because they had been, city had been resurfaced, the street, I mean, had been resurfaced. So what is it causing more blocking? Less flow into the storm drain. But I have several pictures and I'm willing to leave them with you.
okay. So, where's David? Okay. So what you've done, you've walked the creek, taken notes of where you see potential problems.
Yes, sir.
And you got with the railroad, they're cleaning their culverts. Are they gonna address the railroad ties that keep washing in, or are they
Yes.
gonna look on a basis to make sure their crossings
Yes.
are clear?
He told Mike and I yesterday, 50 foot each side of the skull line. They will maintain that. They are going to get it taken care of. I think they removed all the debris today. They're doing this, they're abandoning that other land,
Sure.
but they have their real estate researching it to figure out who owns it.
Okay,
I don't know how long that's going to take and who actually owns the property. I don't know. He told us, reminded us that we're not to get in that 50-foot area, right, Mike?
right.
That is railroad, and they do not want anybody on the railroad, in their bridge, or within 50 foot of it.
Right.
So,
So you've established a contact point.
Yes.
And you're working with them to
Right.
monitor progress.
so we're trying to figure out who owns those bridges, who do we have who to get them out of there.
Okay.
That's where we're at.
And that's gonna go until we have a solution on those?
Yes, he said that their real estate person would make contact back through Mike and get us that information as soon as they determine who the owner of the
Okay.
property is.
Then the street crossings, what are we doing for the ones that we have that are blocked and have growth around them that are restricting flow?
Mike, do you want to answer that?
Check them out and see what we've done. I personally cleaned the one at Sycamore last year, and I think Jim cleaned it just the other day. And the pedestrian bridge, we need to do a little work there on the pedestrian bridge, not on the other street bridge.
Did you hear
Okay.
that? They've been
Roughly.
to Sycamore, cleaned there. A year ago, he said he cleaned it. They're going to go up. They went up to Oak the other day when I was up there because we had some debris and they took it. Fence posts. I don't know if that's coming out of the fields or what, but it was had fence posts in it.
Okay.
So get that out.
We'll get back over in there,
Yeah.
clean the debris up.
And at Sycamore, I think there's some sediment that restricted the flow in there. You're gonna clean out that pipe or that crossing too? Okay,
Yes.
okay. So we're gonna keep working till we get those cleared. Then during this time too, we're gonna research the data that the Corps of Engineers has.
We have
And
two
the
studies
studies.
that we've found.
Okay, we're gonna find out if they've got any other studies to start developing a plan. And then, I think we need to see what they've got to determine what we're gonna need to do to look at the culverts to see if they're big enough to finish addressing the problem. So, let's see, what are you thinking, a month to get the information from,
I'm looking back at Mike because, you know, the railroad property, how quick is that process going to move, Mike?
Well, no, just with, they're gonna go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
We can monitor it, but us getting the Corps of Engineers information to see what information we've got to know where we're gonna have to go. We
Yeah.
need to look at all existing information first.
Yeah.
The railroad has, I talked to Jerry before the meeting tonight, the railroad's already been in there, they cleared out their.
Okay. So we will get with Sean and Craig, and we will report back to you on Craig,
The first meeting of October?
first meeting of October. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Then, Molly Turner?
Could I?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. When was it deemed that it's the property owner's responsibility? Because in the past, the city has cleaned out several of the little areas of the creek.
That's some of the information if the Corps of Engineers has identified it as theirs, we need to work out, and we need to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah, we just need to, and that's what I see, that in this next month, we're gonna have information from the Corps to really start addressing the issues, so we'll know what they will allow us to do and what they're going to restrict being done in the waterway. Because like Sean said, that this pushes the problem farther down, and it backs up. So you can't just go in and do what we think without approval from the Corps. So we're gonna have to develop a dialogue and a process of having them review also.
Do you want these pictures?
Yeah, if you could give them to Kelly, can you see if they're, can you see if they're scanned and you can send them to us maybe? Okay, and Molly?
I might just be piggybacking on what she said, but I do have, I kind of just Googled today the Montgomery County floodplain map, and so I just kind of colored it in myself. And so I live on the yellow part,